Madam President, I come to the Senate floor today to once again urge my Republican colleagues to do what they're elected to do, listen to their constituents, and give Judge Garland the fair consideration he deserves. Madam President, as some of my colleagues have already noted, today marks 21 years since the Oklahoma City bombing, an attack that shocked the world and took 168 innocent lives. I had the honor of meeting with an individual last week who was not only involved in the immediate aftermath of that terrible attack, but who went above and beyond to make sure justice was served on behalf of those who lost their lives. Judge Merrick Garland, the president's nominee for the Supreme Court, was at the scene of that bombing within 2 days. With debris from the Alfred B. Murrah Federal Building still smoldering in the streets, Judge Garland was helping first responders and working with local law enforcement. And as a top official in the Justice Department, he led a massive investigation of the bombing and supervised the prosecution of Timothy McVeigh. And he did all of that, even if it meant more work, more time away from his family, with incredible delicacy and thoroughness. He called his work for the Justice Department following the Oklahoma City bombing the most important thing he's ever done in his life. Madam President, as we remember those who were lost on that day in 1995, and in light of last week being National Crime Victims Week, we remember how Judge Garland honored those victims with his dedicated service. Judge Garland not only did his job with a great deal of heart, working with families who'd lost loved ones, but with vigor to demand that justice be served. His fairness and diligence earned him praise from members of both parties, from victims' families and law enforcement officers, and even from the lead lawyer defending McVeigh. So, Madam President, a person like that, driven by the desire to help people and serve the public, is someone who deserves fair consideration by all of us here in the United States Senate. Madam President, unfortunately, that's not what is happening right now. We are 66 days into this Supreme Court vacancy, and so far, Republican leaders are still refusing to do their jobs. They won't say they are opposed to Judge Garland. They're just refusing to even live up to their constitutional responsibility and consider him. Madam President, that kind of pure obstruction and partisanship is absolutely wrong. People across the country are not going to stand for that. Last week, I met with Judge Garland and talked through his background, his experience, his philosophy, his judicial philosophy. And what I found out, and it would be difficult for any right-minded person not to come to this conclusion after meeting with him, is that Judge Garland is highly passionate, he is highly respected, and highly qualified to serve on the United States Supreme Court. Now, I'm very glad that some Republicans have started meeting with him. That's a great first step, but it cannot be the last step. Families across this country deserve to hear from Judge Garland in a Judiciary Committee hearing under oath and in public. And then he should get a vote where every senator will have the opportunity to do their job and weigh in. If any member doesn't think Judge Garland should serve on the highest court in the land, they should feel free to vote against him. But give him a hearing, give him a vote, and stop this partisanship and obstruction. Madam President, evaluating and confirming Supreme Court justices is one of the most important roles we have in the United States Senate. And it is this issue that actually pushed me to run for the Senate in the first place. Back in 1991, I was a state senator, a former school board member, and a mom. Like so many people across the country back then, I watched the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings in frustration over how the nominee wasn't pushed on the issues that I and so many others thought were so important to the future of our country. I saw how a woman who came to talk about her experiences, Anita Hill, was treated by this Senate. And I decided then and there to run myself for the United States Senate, to give Washington State families like mine a voice in this process. Madam President, I've had the opportunity to use that voice here in the Senate and to make sure Washington State families had a seat at the table in Supreme Court nominations and confirmations over the years. I voted to support some of the candidates, including the Chief Justice nominated by a Republican president. I voted to oppose others. But I always thought it was important that a nominee get the consideration that he or she deserves. And I always worked to make sure the people I represent got their questions answered as best as I could, and that they could have a view into the process that should be above partisanship and politics. But Madam President, if Republicans continue to play election year politics and continue to refuse their jobs, my families in Washington State will not have a voice. Families across America will not have a voice. And the Tea Party gridlock and dysfunction that has dominated too much of our work here in Congress will have claimed another victory. That is unacceptable. So once again, I'm here today on the floor to call on my Republican colleagues, just do your job, meet with Judge Garland, hold a hearing, give him a vote. We owe that to our constituents. It is our constitutional responsibility, and we should get it done.